Today we are installing the Innovation 3918 mtx-l plus digital air fuel ratio gauge kit, blah blah blah. This is going to be going on the kpro system for the K-swap CRV. A little data cable. This is for updating the firmware on the gauge. This looks like it's the actual cable for the O2 sensor. The gauge itself. Not bad. Probably going to just leave it behind the glove box anyway. And this is your wideband O2. This is a Bosch product. Let's see what's the Bosch number on this. 02580170025. I guess that's good. And we've got red as 12 volt, and that's to a switched ignition. Black is ground. White is for a dimming switch, so that we can turn the headlights on, or the lights dim on this. And yellow is the analog output. This is what's going to go to kpro. Here we are under the dash. Just removed that little panel, just a couple screws. Got a ground going back here to a bolt to the chassis, and I've got the other side of it going to this black and yellow for the ignition. So now when I switch the ignition to the on, we should see this go up to 12 volts. So that's accessory on, and then that's ignition on. So that's where we're going to get our 12 volt source. Let's disconnect the battery and unplug this. And yeah, we'll have a look at where we're going to run the gauge and how to splice into everything. Okay, so I unplugged the ignition switch plug, which is this one here. It has the black and yellow, yellow, white and black. I pulled out the terminal, depinned it, and soldered on a wire here. Then solder joined to this wire, which goes over towards the glove box, to a plug like this, which is one that I used from a old airbag loom. So that one of these gray wires is going to 12 volt and the other one's going directly to the battery. Good thing about these plugs is they can only go one way, and they're locking, so you can't really pull them apart that easily. So what I'm going to do is basically create my own plug loom for the gauge so that it can be removed, moved around, placed different places, all kinds of stuff, because I think I want to keep it in the glove box out of sight, or possibly even behind the dash, because I only need it for tuning purposes. Okay, now that we got the 12 volt attached here, let's move over to the other side and have a look at what I've done for the negative. And then we'll put all this on the gauge loom. So on this side, out of the firewall, I've got this gray line coming, which is the negative, which is going to come up and go on this terminal to negative, which is apparently the best source for a ground for this kit. It's not recommended for some reason to share ground, so I'm going to do that. Okay, and just there above you can see the gray wire coming up from the other side of the firewall. And it comes out over this side. So we got this one here going to the battery, and this one going to 12 volt over the ignition switch. And then this side I will unplug and solder these to the gauge, these wires. And then I might make another plug to go to the ECU and the luminance wire, but I don't think I'll use the luminance wire, but we'll see. So this is the plug out of the car that's already wired in. Yellow's ground, so we'll go to black. Green will go to red. So let's strip these ones back, get some solder on some stuff, and see if I can not screw this up. Just leave this over the gauge wiring on the negative and the positive. Okay, so we got negative and positive soldered in here. So now we just need to take this and heat shrink it, and take this one and heat shrink it. If it'll go over. Oh yeah, there we go. About in the middle, something like that. Something like that. That's one part of the loom complete. The other one we are needing is this, which is the analog out. Okay, the next thing we're going to need to figure out is how to do all this. So, the yellow out of the gauge, which is your analog output, needs to go to one of these wires. So I need to figure out how they work, how they're numbered, and where to go with them. So I guess I'll pull the ECU out of the car. Okay, I've got the cover off the ECU, and on this side it says analog inputs 0 to 5 volts. Instructions for this gauge and this O2 sensor. It is 0 volts to 5 volts. So that's what we're looking at, is that terminal there. So we'll probably end up taking one of these. But first I need to figure out which one of these I'm going to use for the sensor and how that all works. So I'm just going to quickly look through the instructions and see what I can find. Okay, with this plugged in and A0 separated, which is this one here, I can now figure out a route, somewhere to hide all of this that I'm not using. Okay, we got this left in here. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be left in here, but someone let me know if I've done something wrong by leaving it here. Don't want to overheat anything, but that's not going to come in contact with anything. The pin is taped to the side here, so this can't slide out of here too easily. Got this wire joined to another airbag plug, so we'll just be using this side here. We'll be using that side, and that will go to the gauge. With that wire run out, I can now put the cover back on this and install it back in the car. ECU is in the car with the other side of this loom attached to it. This is for the data log, analog input, output, whatever. And this side here is for the 12 volt for the gauge. So with this one soldered up, we're all done. And then we can start looking at testing the wiring and calibrating the gauge. And well, actually it's calibrating the O2 sensor. The wiring in the car is sorted. It's not tested, but it's all ran. So the next thing to run is this cable here, which goes from the gauge to the O2 sensor, which will be under the car. So now I just need to run this up through a grommet and under the dash. So let's go do that now. We are under the car. This is the O2 bung that was welded onto the exhaust. It's back the subframe, and this is just under the dash here, right pretty much in the center of the car. There's an old grommet here. I can't remember what it was for, but might have been the old O2 sensor. I'm not sure. I'm going to reuse it. So let's get rid of this. This was originally going to be used with the kind of OEM O2 sensor, but I've since changed to this wideband setup, which means this one needs to go back. This is the hybrid racing one, nice sheathed and labeled and all that good stuff. So what I'm going to do is get the other end of this one and tape it to this and then pull it through. So this end here for the gauge needs to go up, and I'll just tape it onto there, something like that. Cool. Now we can pull that through. Right, this is the cable that runs down underneath the car. We don't need it plugged in just yet. We just need 12 volts applied to here. So I've got 12 volts plugged in, which is this one here. Yep. And the data cable unplugged because we don't need that either. I need to put the ground on the battery terminal, and then we'll turn the key and see if anything explodes. We should see something called error 2, which means the gauge is now in a calibration mode, I guess. Anything that was stored on it's been cleared. Shouldn't be anything on there because it's new, but anyway, we're going to leave that for 30 seconds in that state. Then power it down, plug in the O2 sensor in open air, so not in the exhaust, and then return everything back on and let it calibrate. So let's start with the battery. Okay, now we should see power come onto this. Here we go. Error 2. So we're supposed to leave that for about 30 seconds or so. Okay, power it down. And now I need to plug in this to the back of the gauge, which is this. Like that. And then under the car we need to plug in the O2 sensor. Okay, we got this plugged in, sitting in open air. A few seconds after calibration it should start showing a reading, probably in the high 20s because it's in open air. Here we go, calibrate, and there we go, 22.4. Now that we have the O2 sensor calibrated, we can fit it to the exhaust and finish running the wire. And that's a 22. I forgot to hit record, but I got this bracket for the shifter cables mounted further back on the cables themselves, which has given them a better angle, and it's also given me something to zip tie the actual plug to. I've got the plug running through a grommet here, zip tied in place, and then fill in the hole there, zip tied up here. So with that, might still have to do something with this. Maybe I'll loop it back. Yeah, I'll probably do something like that. So I'll get this zip tied in place, and then we can start the car and have a look at an actual air fuel mixture and start looking at trying to get the kpro to pick up that signal. We're getting some numbers. Right. Well, it's working. Seems like it might be a bit lean, but yeah, I've got some fault codes I need to go through, and I guess it's now time to plug in the gauge to the ECU and start looking at how to get them talking to each other. Okay, let's load up kpro, have a look at some of the settings I've got here. So what I did is went to analog inputs, which is this tab here, and I chose a name, lambda custom, analog 0, because that is the pinout I used on that harness. And under this drop-down conversion, I went wideband PLX SM AFR. Not sure if that's 100% right, but it's what I've got it set to. Now under miscellaneous, I've disabled all the ECU options, immobilizer, secondary O2, purge system, ELD, and invert EPS, blah, 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 blah. Now under closed loop, I've unticked built-in wideband and selected external, and then under the drop-down, my externals popped up. I have disabled P1167 O2 sensor heater, and I have disabled P0134 O2 sensor response. Again, I'm not sure if this is all 100% right, but it's what's working for me. When I take this to have it tuned, I'm sure there'll be some things that I've missed, but this seems to be working for now. Now we're having one issue still actually, in that when I start the car, the gauge and O2 sensor go back into a heater cycle, and then the car doesn't see the air-fuel ratio until it's warmed up, the O2 sensor, even though it's already warmed up right now, which is weird. If you look over here, 18.8. So she's warmed up and she's ready to go. Now if I start it, it goes to heater, and then this shows 10 AFR, air-fuel ratio, which is not good. And then it almost stalls. And then, let's see, once this is done saying heater, there we go. Now it's back. How bizarre. Well, it's got the O2 at least reading correctly on the ECU. The fact that it heats up and then gives me a lean reading before the car started and then goes back into a heat cycle after I've started it is a bit strange, and it runs like shit until the O2 sensor turns back on out of heat mode. I don't know what that's all about, but I'll look into it further. But for now, that's going to do, and I'll get the interior sorted, get it all put back together, and do something about this intake pipe. This is still the temporary intake pipe I've used, part of an OEM RD5, just to slip this over and put a filter on it so that I can make use of the factory location for the intake air temperature sensor. But now it's time to actually put something proper together here so that I can take this for a drive and not worry about the filter falling out and getting run over. I got the air filter ran down just in front of the front wheel there. This is not a permanent spot for this, but it'll do for now. It was getting a little bit of heat soak being so close to those fans. Also ran a little T from my double radiator cap bullshit that's going on here. Right, well, let's drive this home. First time driving it with the O2 hooked up. Yeah, wish me luck. All right. See how this goes. No, you stay there, Spanky. Oh, I got no lights for the cluster. Ah, shit. Yeah, come on, hurry the up.
Big bore on your Honda there.
What's that?
You got a big bore on it. The exhaust.
Wow.
Yes. Nice shiny one.
Yeah,
anyway.
I've got an exhaust on it, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, all good. Got a full license, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just count 10, that's all.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So, dog.
Yep, this is Spanky. Yeah, we're just on our way home from working on this, actually.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Spanky wants out of the car so bad. I just got pulled over as well.
Did you?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What did they why?
He was like, oh, it's got a big bore exhaust. I was like,
Oh really?
yeah.
Did they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't